Hello and welcome to another update. And a number of you have been wondering where I've been. Perhaps I've been dropped off the end of the earth, or the deep state have finally got me, or perhaps I've run away. None of those things. We've been really busy, and sometimes the work that I do isn't just about podcasting. Remember, I don't research. I don't sit looking at lots and lots of videos and then pull it all together and do it. And there's a lot to be said for that, and there are people that do it and they do it very well, but that's not the work that I do. So thank you for those of you who had a bit of concern, wondering where I was. We're fine, we're ticking along, and just wanted to touch base with you really and have a look at what's happening. I did a show with Robert David Steele, Sacha Stone and Charlie Ward, and I think Robert David Steele called it the Four Amigos or something, which I thought was amusing. And I agreed with Charlie Ward that I'd received information that yesterday, Friday, might be a day that something could happen. Charlie had received quite a long text, which I know on his site, and others he's shared and he's made quite available. And for those of you who didn't catch this Four Amigos show, I'd said that I get two sorts of alerts. The first alert is one where I'm 100% accurate in terms of it's going to happen. And I will go out and put that information out there and be absolutely positive, absolutely upfront, this is going to happen. And then I get a second sort of alert, which is we would like this to happen, but it's subject to change. Imagine a board of directors around a big retail store, in a shopping mall, in a shopping centre, and they announced to the public that we're going to go open the doors to the public on Monday. But that is if the guys doing the ventilation are finished on the Sunday, and that is if the guys fixing the shelves are finished on the Friday, and that is if the parking lots have been properly signed off. But all that considered, we will open to the public on Monday. And that's a sort of second alert, which is this is our intention, but there are so many variables that we can only say to you it's an intention. And yesterday's alert, I'd actually gone on this Four Amigos show and said it's coming under the second banner, that it's their intention to do it, but there's lots of variables. And I was hopeful something would happen, of course, but I wasn't that convinced because it had come in under the second barrier, if you like, the second arm of the alert. And I wrote to the US coordinator and other coordinators saying, please let me know, because you'll be the first guys to know if something's going down. I'm looking for power outages. I'm looking for messages coming over your cell phone, your mobile phone, radio, television, etc. But I didn't go to the full alert, as it were. I just said, if you pick anything up, please let me know. And there was apparently nothing, which on one hand, of course, is very disappointing. Hello, cat. Very disappointing and very, very sad. Come and say hello. Storm Beyond, the black cat. But on the other hand, I'm not that concerned because it didn't come in as a do or die message. And, I wanted to just say to people that, whilst it is disappointing, I'd like it to have happened yesterday and the day before. Let's look at the situation to reassure ourselves that this isn't all some utopia, dream, some magic mushroom dream. We've all had magic mushrooms and we're all trying to not live in the world that Biden lives in, and we're trying to create our own sort of reality. And I just want to reassure you that actually this is a reality. There isn't another force in America that could make the chief executive of Amazon resign and walk out of his job. The police couldn't do it to him. The courts wouldn't do it to him. Politicians couldn't do it. Lawmakers couldn't do it. Big companies couldn't do it. Bezos was and is the richest man on the planet, the number one man, the richest man on the planet, and sitting on top of an organization, if not the biggest in the world, is one of the biggest. So what force on earth could make somebody like that suddenly, without any warning, announce his retirement? And I quote, it's normally, isn't it, politicians say, I want to spend more time with my family. That's the normal quote. And his quote was, "I want to spend more time on my philanthropic work worrying about climate change." Okay, well, we won't go into climate change, but the point I'm making is there's only one force strong enough in the United States of America to make that man publicly resign, and that's the military. If the military were not in control of America, Biden would be running the show like a normal president. He wouldn't be locked in the studio, which had a connection to Amazon, and that's why the military went after him, because you can't run a head of a corporation and not know that one of your studios is being leased or gratis lent out to somebody who fraudulently won an election. But if there was no military and if everything was as normal, then Biden would be doing what every other president has done, not hiding away in some studio signing fake documents claiming to be doing this, that and the other. And so, let's just look at the hard reality. The reality is that there is something very wrong with the Biden administration. The lights on the White House do go out at 11 o'clock at every night. Well, that's because the janitor turns the lights off in all the offices because there's nobody there working. Let's look at Lieutenant General Flynn's wonderful real coup for Doug to be able to interview him. And a lot of people have picked up to the direct question where Lieutenant General Flynn says, no, the military are not in control of America, and no, President Trump did not sign the Insurrection Act. And a lot of people have just heard that, and that's all they've heard, and then they've gone into meltdown. Within 6 hours of Lieutenant General Flynn receiving a full pardon from President Trump, he had his full clearance at the Pentagon returned to him. You cannot have a man in that position coming on public program, and yes, it's alternative media, it's a truth media, it's a patriot, but it's still public. You can't have somebody like that coming on and saying, oh yes, the military run America. Can you imagine? That would be fed to the mainstream media. The mainstream media would be saying that he was trying to overthrow Biden, etc., and he'd lose his job. So any of you who are upset and saddened because he said that, I would like you just to hear my words that he couldn't say anything else. It's a bit like people who have real, genuine alien experiences in Area 51. And they come out and they retire from the military and they go to their handler, their boss, and say, I want to write a book. And look at Charles Hall. Charles Hall was a weatherman in Area 51. He wrote several good books. And the only way he was allowed to do it was he had to say on the front of the book that this is made up story. This is made up. It's not real. And that's how they allowed him to do the books. And that's what they'll do. So unless they authorize you to do something, you cannot say it. So don't shoot the messenger with Flynn. He did what he had to do. But then if you listen to the rest of the interview and you hear it right through, you hear some wonderful, what I call them, sort of ropes or lines thrown, which if you pick them up, they tell you everything. And one of them was, Flynn says, I think I'll still refer to Trump as President Trump because he is still the president. Then there's a gap, and he says, well, the Congress are impeaching him, and you can only impeach a president, so I guess he's a president. They think he is. That tells us quite a lot who really is the president. And then, excuse me, and then we go towards the end of the Doug Billings interview with the general, and he says, Doug says to the general, look, I had a bet that Trump would win, and I had a bet of a bottle of wine. So it wasn't money, it was a bottle of wine. Must have been a good bottle, Doug. And he said, I guess I've lost the bet, haven't I, General? And I'm going to have to give him that bottle of wine. And so the general sort of thinks about it a bit and smiles, and he says, no, I wouldn't give it away just yet. So if you listen to these coded messages, you actually do get a much more positive pull on what's happening. You know, I was in a Skype conversation with one of the astronauts, Edgar Mitchell, about a year before he passed, and I got on very well with him, and he gave me a photograph, a signed photograph of him on the moon, and we had this conversation. And the guy, I was just a guest, and he was a guest as well, and the guy who was hosting it, unfortunately, was a bit eager, and he said to Edgar Mitchell, well, when you're on the moon, did you see any aliens? You know, and you know, Edgar Mitchell is like the general. They've signed the equivalent of the British Official Secrets Act. I don't know what it's called in America, but I mean, it'll be that thick, you know. And to ask somebody that sort of question, and I jumped in very quickly and I said, oh look, you can't ask him that, because he's not going to be able to, you know, he's not going to be able to. Don't put him in that position. He can't answer that. And when a few months before the election, Trump was interviewed, I think by Donald Trump, I think by his son, and they were talking about Roswell, and the president went as close as he could to the question, and I think Don said to him, I think Don Jr. said to him, look, are you going to be more open about what happened at Roswell? And the president answered along these lines. He said, oh, there's some very interesting people in Roswell. They know a great deal. It's a very interesting place. Yeah, there's a lot of people there that know a lot. Now, that doesn't get him in any trouble, because he's not actually said anything that could be used by mainstream media. But those of us who are truth-seeking and are more open-minded, we understand what that individual is trying to tell us without breaking any rules. I mean, you know, the day that I'm looking forward to is when officially everything is released. Everything. I don't think I'll ever get that day, but I think we'll get to a day when a lot is released, and then people can, you know, make their decisions. Because I don't think when the truth comes out about all those poor kids being tortured in underground tunnels, and you know how the entertainment industry has been part and parcel with some satanic stuff, when all that comes out, I'm sure people will go into meltdown truly and collapse, partly because the human psyche is generally good, and when faced with terrible evil, just wants to push it away and pretend it never happened, and they go into denial, right through to, well, why did I not know this? And then we get all the backlash where people will say to, you know, people like you listening to the audience, most of you who are listening and believing, that people will come up to you and say, well, how did you know? You know, why didn't I know? How did you know? And that's a real question for them. It isn't a question for you. You know, you know because you know, because you know. They don't know because they don't know, because they don't know, because they choose not to know. And so that's all yet to come out. And what I'm saying is that I think it's very hard for Biden to get a lift on Marine One. I think it's very difficult for him to get a lift on Air Force One. And the troops very, very finding it very hard to salute him. We've seen that very plausible video of him in the studio, and I put that on my site, and others have run with it. So there's plenty of evidence. So the big question is, well, why aren't they doing anything about it? And I was having a conversation with a few people today, because it's the key topic. You know, why are they letting this roll out? What is the advantage? What's the point? And here's the difficult thing. If we accept that Biden's hands are tied and the people behind him are tied, and all the foreign intervention is quite bottled up and can't do much, then actually he's not doing a huge amount of damage. Oh yeah, he's changing the rules so that men can legitimately take part in women-only sports, and a few other crazy things. But he's not actually doing anything of any consequence. And so the people who are really running the show they're not emotional. They're not feeling what we're feeling on the ground. They're saying, actually, we're in a very strong position. The owner of the shop, the owner of the store, has stepped outside, and someone else has come in to run the store. And the owner of the store is looking through the window, watching the mess that the guy's making. And as long as that mess is superficial and can be tidied up, it's not too much of a problem. But if the guy starts, taking money out the till or stuff like that, then the owner of the shop will have to step back in. And so I think what's happening is that this period of time is allowing more and more thus far hidden, whether that's individuals that are hidden or things that have been done that have been hidden, more and more to come out. I use my hands. Here's the information, and it's growing like that. Now, if the good guys step in and they say, this is the point, we're going to do it, that's where they get. But if they leave it longer, it gets bigger and bigger. And I think they're going to wait until it starts to do that, because then they'll say, we've got everything out of the situation that we need to get out of it. And I'll give you an example. Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, the mainstream media are reporting that nothing's happening, that she's asked for a bail, and that's been refused, quite rightly in my opinion. But that's all it's gone to. It's just she's waiting. The reality, actually, that's the truth that the mainstream media are not saying, is that she has spoken a great deal. And I understand, and that's my understanding, that some of the target locations under the ground that contain facilities where people are being held against their will, that information has been passed to special operations and have been and are ongoing working on that information. Now, why would she do that? Well, she would do it because she knows that her own side, the bad side, will want to silence her as quickly as possible. They really would, because they know that she's talking, and that's why they've kept hold of her, not because they're frightened of her running away, but because they know the moment they release her from this secure location, the bad side will finish her life straight away. And she is being checked on apparently every 15 minutes, 24/7. So physically a guard has to go and check on her every 15 minutes to make sure she's still alive and breathing. She's a very important asset and has passed information. Now, once the trap closes, then all of that is just going to end, because that is the moment you put the dossier down on the table and you say that's what we're running with. And please don't expect people like Biden to be dragged up in front of the court at this stage. That's the very last action. It's everyone else around them. And there is credible evidence that a lot of these key players have actually been it's different in America. You have a different system than in Great Britain, but basically sort of charged and then released pending what have you. And another really good question is, well, why are they still playing this game if Biden really has been arrested? If he is a clone or if he is a double, why are they still playing this game? Why hasn't he run for the hills? Same with Nancy Pelosi, same with Clintons. If there was any truth behind this, surely these people would do it. And the answer is, where will they go? Apart from the moon and Mars, where will they go on Earth? And I can assure you that any journeys they take, anywhere they go, they are being followed. And I don't mean Dick Tracy type following. I mean the most advanced, sophisticated following that you would read in a science fiction comic. And so they can't go anywhere. The only thing they can do is what they were designed to do, which is play the game out to the end, because that's the way they are and that's all they know. And so they will play the game. And that is why at that so-called inauguration, when the cameras were not obviously looking at Obama and Clinton and all the rest of them, they were looking very somber, very long-faced, literally the type of face you would have if you were at a funeral of a friend. But when the cameras were on them and they were being waved to, the camera's on you, then they would go into their acting mode. But when the camera was just catching them from the side, look at the way they are. And that's because they haven't really got what they hoped for. They've actually gone into a trap. They know it, but where else can they go? So the frustrating thing for all good people is, how much longer do we have to put up with this charade? It's not a clown show. It's offensive, and I've made the point, and I'm only speaking personally, that I'm not into this popcorn. And the people who pass me information, they say, enjoy the popcorn and watch the show, and actually I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy what I'm seeing. I'm not happy at all. And it's no good saying to people, trust the plan. And that's a very bad bit of PR. And that's a military person who doesn't actually understand the audience, doesn't understand human consciousness, only understands a military thing. Trust the plan. So this person would say to, I don't know, a room full of a couple of hundred soldiers, trust the plan. And they all salute and say, of course. And they all do trust the plan, because that's what they are. But civilians are not like that. And it's actually patronizing to say to all of us, trust the plan, don't question it, just do it. That's very patronizing. They'd have been much better if they'd understood the audience, if they understand what humans who are not in the military are like. They would have said, trust the military. Just that change in words, trust of the military. And you'd have found that most Americans who have a strong connection with the military would have trusted them. So there have been some gaffes, some very bad PR gaffes. Telling people to trust the plan is in my opinion, it's very patriarchal. As a condescending thing. It's like, don't worry about it, don't question us, we know exactly what we're doing. Well, you may know what you're doing, but the way you're communicating with the public is not very good. Nobody's asking people to give away secrets. And there's another clip that I think I asked to put on the website, the Flynn, basically saying, only a fool, I'm paraphrasing, only a fool will tell the enemy when, where and how he will strike. And I was reminded by the people who keep me fed with information how Obama once gave the time and the date that troops were being withdrawn. I think it was from Afghanistan, which would give every evil person exactly the schedule when to attack them. And Trump never did that. Trump would always give wrong dates or times they were coming out, or he just wouldn't give it full stop. And that's the point. If you're in a war, and there is a war here, you don't tell the other side exactly what your plans are, unless you are so confident that you've got everything done that you can do it a few hours beforehand. And whilst I know fully that people like Clinton, Obama and Biden were never really going to be in the inauguration, it was all filmed, there were going to be a number of senators and Congress men and women who were going to be there. And I think that's the group that they wanted to arrest. The good guys wanted to arrest because they were all going to be in one location. And then, 1 hour or so before the inauguration was due to take place, there was that explosion in Madrid, which mainstream media have told us was a gas explosion. I've been told it was a bomb. And that was one of the reasons, or the main reason, why there was no good guy action at the inauguration, because that was a very credible threat, which unfortunately or sadly was sorted. The good guys had it all worked out and dealt with an hour or so later, but the timing had slipped. So that explosion did just what the bad guys wanted it to do, which was to delay or stop that. And that's the sort of situation that's been faced here, that it isn't just a simple case of knocking on a door and doing something. There is a wealth of people underneath these bad guys who are still resisting terribly. Look at Paul Lin Wood. They're now trying to prosecute him for voting in one place and living in another. They're actually accusing Lin Wood of voter fraud. It's not insane, because the evil side so hate Lin Wood because he's done so much to bring the truth out, that they will try and turn the whole thing on himself. And that's why people like Lieutenant General Flynn and others are very aware that the other side's still got teeth. They still can cause a lot of problems. It's not just in an apple, you can take the knife and cut out the bad bit of the apple and eat the rest of it. I'm afraid the United States, if it were likened to an apple, using that analogy because of apple pie, of course, is full of rot. That's the terrible, sad thing about that once great country. It's full of rot. So what you've either got to do is you've got to take your knife and you've got to cut all of these bits out, and then you've got to regrow into those cutout bits good wholesome bits of apple again, so that once again the apple is whole. And I often think that we, the audience, don't fully appreciate, or how can we, because we're not sitting there with all the information coming in, we don't fully appreciate the enormity of the task. And there is only one man, and that's President Trump, who has been brave enough and strong enough to take it on the chin, not just for the 4 years that we're aware of, but prior to that and now, who I think has the strength to come in when the time is right. So others have got to bring it to a point that he can come back. And I've said on my very first podcast regarding the election, remember I've been doing this for 10 years, but regarding the election, that President Trump would be successful if those around him who had originally put him in that position, who had convinced him to do this, to become president, to fight the great evil, if those same people stood by him. I said if they stood by him, he was going to come back. But if they deserted him, like so many of these rhinos and goodness knows who else, then no, he'd never come back. Now the good news is that those people that originally sat round with him and put him there have not deserted him. And so the point is that he is still an integral part of what is playing out. And the Congress, Senate, still going ahead with this impeachment against a private individual. And as Flynn said, he must be the president, because you cannot impeach a private individual. As far as the on-the-face public rules are, he's a private individual. But obviously, under the scenes, the bad guys still consider him the president. Of course, because Biden's in a studio pretending to be in the Oval Office. President Trump is in Mar-a-Lago, which, if you didn't know, was the summer, winter, I can't remember, because it's in Florida, isn't it? So the temperatures are much warmer than they are here in Britain. We're expecting a terrible snowstorm soon. But it was the retreat place. Let's just call it that. It was the retreat place for the president who wanted to come out of DC, and goodness knows, you would want to come out of DC, wouldn't you? Come out of DC, go into Mar-a-Lago, and do your time there, then go back, recharge and go back. And I understand that it was too expensive to maintain. It was sold back, and then President Trump bought it and decided that would be a really good building. I think when he bought it, this plan was already being created, and it's got control rooms, it's got underground bunkers, it's got everything you need. It's like a little mini White House. And so he's there, the president, in the other White House. And of course, what we all want is mainstream media to carry that news. We want it so that we all have the opportunity, whether it's on a cell phone, mobile phone, television, the radio, whatever it is, it's going to be in our face. And that those people who have willfully ignored the facts or just gone through life half asleep will be forced to at least confront this truth. That's what we want, because we know, I'm referring to the audience, we know the only way that we can truly say that we've turned a corner is when mainstream media changes and the truth is one way or the other got out there. And that for us is the big point. But if, let's just put ourselves in the minds of those guys around the table, that actually is perhaps the end product. What's more important are children to be rescued underground. I'd certainly be arguing for that, and I know you would as well. I mean, it was a choice between CNN doing something or rescuing a couple of hundred kids in an underground base. I would be disgusted if anybody said, I think we should go for CNN. We would all go to save the children, wouldn't we? And so there are so many other real demands that this group of people are, and Trump's the boss. Trump will sit there, from what I understand, and they all give their specialties. their knowledge, and there will be a military side which says we don't have a choice, we have to do this, this and this, and Trump won't come in and say no, unless he feels it's wrong. He will really let them do that. But in terms of the order of things, Trump's really quite in on that, and he'll say no, don't want that yet. I want this to happen before that happens. I want you to have your information before you do what you do, and that's how it works, because they're not feeling they're under pressure like we feel. We feel terrible every day. We wake up and we think, is it going to be today? And we put the phone on them. No, it hasn't happened. No, when is it going to happen? They're not like that. They are living on their nerves because they're fighting a war, not bombs and bullets, but a war for the hearts and minds of the people of the world. And so, we've got to trust them. We have to trust Trump. And if we don't trust Trump, then we've lost faith. That's the bottom line. Because Trump hasn't lost faith with us. Because otherwise he will just go and say, right, I've done with this. I'm going to go back into the world of business, and I want nothing more to do with you lot. Couldn't blame him if he did that. But no, what did he do? He set up the office of Trump, the office of Trump. We can sometimes call him the president, but it's the office of Donald Trump. So therefore, he's showing everyone that he's actually involved. And so we have to trust him. And whatever he chooses, whatever he says, we should trust that decision. We should actually trust that man, because for 4 years, even though hell and high water, and I'm using that deliberately, hell and high water were fighting against him, look at the economic miracle that man did in 4 years to America. When he inherited America, he inherited bankrupt country, not just financially, but morally bankrupt, with the most awful deals with the most awful people and organizations. And in 4 very short years, with all of the things they threw at him, everything they did, he still managed to improve the life of so many Americans. I mean, let's just remember that more black Americans got a job under his presidency than at any other time. And then they have the evil to say that he's racist. I mean, it's unbelievable. We won't go on to that. But what I'm saying is that we need to trust him, and we need to trust that he knows what he's doing. And we need to trust that whatever is coming, whatever that new government is going to be, whatever that new financial system, however it's going to work, that he will choose the right people to put in the right positions. He will choose those people who have stayed loyal to the concept of freedom. And let's not trust the plan, let's trust the man. So that would be my slogan. If I was to do a t-shirt, it would be trust the man, not the plan. And I've got a lot of time for military people, but they don't really understand the public. They don't understand the civilians. They were once a civilian themselves, and it gets all knocked out of them. And they're very different. And I was on the Doug Billings show. I said to Doug, I don't know if it was off air or not actually, I said, can you, when you speak to General Flynn, can you just say from me, congratulations to his brother, I think it's Charles, who been promoted, and Charles Flynn is in Hawaii, that great American naval base, and in charge of the Pacific Fleet, or going to have some involvement with the Pacific Fleet. I don't want to be specific and get told I'm wrong, but it was definitely to do with that, which is important because of Taiwan and China. And I said, just please pass my good wishes on to his brother. Somebody wrote to me and said, well, I don't know why you're doing that, because he's disowned Michael Flynn. He's disowned his brother. And I said, I am thanking someone who's giving service to their country. Regardless of whatever politics are going on, if somebody gives service to others to serve their country, as a military person, I will recognize that and thank them. And I'll do the same for veterans. Actually, I will always say thank you for your service, because that's the way I was brought up. And I just think that people are getting too tied up in the minutiae if you step back a little bit, don't worry, you won't lose the vision of what's happening. You'll actually get a better vision. Remember my image, you'll get more of what's going on. Don't get fixated on this. This didn't happen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and this didn't happen. We've seen pictures of police cars and lorries turning up, and vans and coaches and buses turning up at the White House. We've seen the most amazing things, and there's enough evidence there for us to be confident that this is not a normal presidency. There are 2 forms of government operating at the moment in America, and whether we like it or not, we have to be patient. And President Trump will do what he's got to do, and we just have to trust the man. Trust the man, not the plan. Listen, it's been lovely to speak to you. Thank you. You know, I'm banned from Facebook. I'm banned from YouTube. And they ban us because we tell the truth. They don't like the truth. In a true democracy, you should be able to have all points of view, as long as you're not rude and, you know, nasty and tell lies. You should have that option to let people choose. And what these big corporations are doing is saying, we don't permit you to have access to all the news. We are going to feed your brain full of the information that we want you to have. And I've talked about it, and I was very disappointed when I opened the Saturday Telegraph British newspaper. It's a big article on the Super Bowl, and it said in big letters, all you need to know about the Super Bowl. And it's this patriarchal point about, I will tell you all you need to know. In other words, you don't need to know anything else. I'll tell you it all, and what I tell you is the information of truth, and that's it. So always, 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 please be on your guard when you read the words, all you need to know. And your response should be, don't you dare tell me what I need to know. You tell me your take on it, and then I'll go and listen to other people, and I'll do my own work, and then I will decide what I believe. But don't ever tell me that you're limiting my information, because that's what that article in the Daily Telegraph said, all you need to know, i.e. in our article on the Super Bowl, you don't need to know anything else, just what we have here. You know, and that is a mirror image of what is going on at a higher level, is that you don't need to know this, and this. All you need to know is this tiny little bandwidth of information. Don't worry about all of this here. Don't concern yourself. Don't be worried by it. You know, you don't need to worry. That's a very, very slippery road where we end up in 20 years' time, if we don't do something about it, with children who grow up with a concept of the world that is as narrow as that. That's what we are all, regardless, not just Americans, we're all, or should be, fighting for freedom. Freedom isn't just about, I can't go out of my room, or I want to go out at 7 o'clock in the evening, or I want to carry a gun, or I want to do this, I want to do that. Freedom is actually far more vital, which is the freedom to think, the freedom to have information, to form an opinion, and the freedom to express that, as long as you're not being racist or illegal or anything like that, to be able to express a point of view. And it's not just in danger. I mean, that's what's being taken away. And that's a fact. America, the land of the free. Can you imagine it? How many years has it been sold down the river? How many years under the blanket, under the curtain, has all this been going on, which is now emerging? And I'll tell you something, and I'll finish up now. If President Trump hadn't come along, America would have quietly, without any issue, slipped into communism through socialism and communism. And China would have sat back and said, that didn't cost us anything financially in terms of tanks and bombs and bullets and dead soldiers. Yeah, it cost us a ton of money, but it doesn't matter. We've got a huge printing press around the back, and we'll just keep printing it out, because that's how they fight wars, with money. So just be strong. Just actually realize that there's a whole ton of stuff that's yet to happen, and I don't know when it's going to happen, and you don't know when it's going to happen, but I'm sure that President Trump does. All right, been lovely to reconnect with you. Take care. Bye-bye.